I wanted to talk about, like, there are so many ways that you can support yourself. And I'm sharing this because I've had to do it. I was dealing with a lot of anxiety. I was going to therapists. I tried out different therapists. I was having issues at work about me even going to therapy. I was the tea lady at work. And so there are so many things I added to my routine to help me just get through the day. Hello to the corporate girlies, the gals, the pals. I am here today to talk about something a little different. So typically, I know under Consider Your Soul, I like to talk about just the different ways that we need to be considering our soul in our daily activities and what we do and how we show up. But I thought today would be a perfect day to talk about the corporate lifestyle. Like, all of the people who work in corporate, how can you support yourself? How can you consider your soul? So I took notes because I didn't want to leave anything out. And so I wanted to get up early because I wanted to meet y'all here, because I understand what it was like to get up this early, get going, try to get your motivation, try to get out the door, and really just find that thing. And, one of the things I wanted to talk about was the effects that being in those type of environments, especially if they're not the most positive, how they affect our soul. Usually I'm talking about soul care, which is really just taking self-care to a deeper level. It's being more intentional and understanding how our soul is calling to us, how to care for our soul. So it's more of a spiritual experience. So first, let me give my background as to why I want to talk about this subject. I went to college to be an engineer, graduated, started my corporate job. I worked for about almost 10 years. And what's so funny is I remember myself saying when I was in college, like, I'll give this 10 years and then I'll do whatever I want. I thought I was just talking, but turns out that's how it worked out. So earlier this year, probably, so after this stint of working, really what made me transition was that I felt a call on my soul. I became a spiritual herbalist while I was still working, and I could no longer ignore what I knew was true. Like, for years, I had been talking about leaving my job, and I just could never do it. I didn't see what was next. I didn't know what was next. But once I took that journey to become a spiritual herbalist, what I realized was that I really just needed to get back to myself. I needed to remember who I was. So this is self-remembrance. And which is why I say this is soul care, not self-care, because I'm not just, taking care of my body in a sense of, let's go get a massage. Those things are a part of it. Or, I just need to take a bath. Those things are a part of it. It was on a deeper level of you're not even living in alignment with your soul. So all of that came to light, and I couldn't ignore it anymore. Especially once I did this, because when I did my spiritual herbalism apprenticeship, what I realized was more about who I was, more about what lit me up. I remember when I told one of my project managers that I was ready to quit, she was like, you should absolutely do this. You don't see how you light up when you talk about this. You've never been like that at work. I was very mediocre at work. I was very just get it done, but I was on the manager track, because I'm like, if I'm going to be here, I want to do something that makes people's lives better. So, I was going to be one of those managers who got into a position and took care of her people. Like, that's what I was going to do. But every interview I would have that would, because they do this thing where you got to go here, you got to go there, you got to go there. And then, we'll position you for management. And they, I was bouncing around. I didn't want to bounce around to these positions that I didn't want to be in. The last position I was in was kind of for that reason. And so every interview I would get within the company, I would do exceptionally well at the interview. But it would always be somebody else. Like, it would always be between me and somebody else. And I know now that was God blocking me from starting something that I didn't actually want to do and repositioning me for what I'm doing now. So pretty much I just couldn't take it anymore. I came into the new year feeling great, feeling like, oh, I wish my life was like this all the time. As soon as I went back to work, it's like I plummeted. I went into a depression. And so maybe for the next month and a half, I debated whether it was time to quit. So I ended up quitting, crying in front of my boss. It was uncomfortable because I'm like, why am I crying in front of this lady? But I know I kind of freaked her out, but it was just such a release for me to be able to say, I don't want to do this anymore. I'm leaving. And so that's not what this is about. I want y'all to know this is not about quitting your job. If that's on your heart, then maybe that's a message you needed to hear, but this is not about quitting your job, because I would never tell somebody to quit their job unless they knew they wanted to do that. The solution to our problems is not necessarily to quit our job. Maybe, for me, that was a solution for me, and maybe I could have stuck it out longer, but I didn't want to. We always talk about the spirit and the body and, mind, body, and soul and taking care of all the things. But it's so hard to get rid of, to release the stability that comes in working in those environments. I got to do what I want, go where I want it, spend how I want it. And I still kind of do that, even when I shouldn't. But I have had to try to budget better, and it's not been the best experience for me. So that's been a hard transition, is from this place of stability to now I have to be like, do I have enough money to do this? Because I don't know if I can recoup this right away. So that's been a lesson for me. But again, that's not why we're here. I do want to talk more about how deeply I felt this pull and what it felt like almost like I was coming back into my body. Like when I left, I had this maybe like a month of depression of just like, what am I going to do? Why did I make that decision? I knew I wanted to start my business, but business takes time to grow. But what I did realize was I couldn't go back. No matter what, my body was like, no. My spirit was like, no. I meditated about it. I prayed about it. The answers just kept being no. And new opportunities started popping up to sustain me enough to get me to the next month, to sustain me enough to get me to the next month. So that's a little bit of my story. It's a lot of emotions. It's a lot of change and transition. It's a lot of stepping into your anointing, into your calling, being repositioned into the space that is more authentic for you. And so I want to be here as your support system. Because one of the things I said was, being in corporate, like there are a lot of people who like these roles. There are a lot of people who want to continue to do this work. There are a lot of people who are positioned specifically to do this work. Like that is their calling, to be that voice in those spaces, to be that representation in those spaces. And I fully believe in that. But I know that I had to go. And so I also want to be here for the girlies, gals, and pals. Everybody who's sticking it out. Everybody who knows that's where they're supposed to be. How can you support yourself? Because those environments are intense. And sometimes even if you're not in the mix of the things. So this is not just people. This is not for people who are like, oh, I'm on a management level, and so I'm always stressed. This is for anybody who works in that environment, because what it does, being in spaces where there's so much energy around you, there's so much politics, there's so much negativity, there's just so much that happens in that space that you may not even be exposed to, but you can feel it. I remember telling somebody one day, like I was talking and I was good, and then all of a sudden it was almost like this wave of like anxiety hit me, or like I just started feeling anxious, and I started feeling like uncomfortable. And I turned around and there were like two big managers behind me. And so I'm just like, nobody can tell me that there is not a spiritual presence there that weighs on you, that weighs on your heart, that weighs on your body. And so because one of the things that I'm doing now is herbalism, especially spiritual herbalism, and I call myself a soul care herbalist, I wanted to talk about like there are so many ways that you can support yourself. And I'm sharing this because I've had to do it, For at least 5 of those years, I was dealing with a lot of anxiety. I was going to therapists. I tried out different therapists. I was having issues at work about me even going to therapy. I was the tea lady at work. And so there are so many things I added to my routine to help me just get through the day. And so for me, I knew this was not the end all be all for me. I didn't know how it would change. I didn't know what that would look like. But I know that some people really do love the work they do. Enjoy being there, but the space is heavy on them. The environment is heavy on them. It doesn't feel safe. And so this also comes with how can you protect yourself How can you create safer spaces? And a lot of things like that. So what I wanted to make sure I talked about was that you have resources to support yourself. Maybe you don't want to be there, but you're not able to leave. There's a lot that can support you in that space. So what I want to talk about first, herbal medicine. As an herbalist, I have to inform you there is a lot of support out there for you. The number one thing I can think of is adaptogens. And what adaptogens help us to do is adapt to stressors over time. So I like to think of it as our shield. And so it really supports our nervous system for long-term damage, things that have been damaged for a long time, or to prevent long-term damage to our nervous system, which is, how we feel things. So I think about how much anxiety I was going through in that space and how much anxiety I go through now. And I can tell you it is a significant difference. Like, I don't even associate myself with anxiety at this point because it's not something I feel. Every now and then, maybe if the situation calls for it. But I think about, like, even when I wasn't at work, I would drive around the city anxious. Like, it was just on me and all over me and everything I did. And of course, there were times where I didn't feel it, but it was not abnormal for me to feel panicky or anxious just doing day-to-day things. And so what I realized is there was so much surrounding me coming from this environment. And we don't like to blame it on our environment. It's just like, oh, this is just something I am. But when I left, everything changed, and one of the things somebody told me, actually, one of the things I was writing about was, how do you leave your job behind when it was everything you wanted? And so I said, when you realize it required you to leave your heart behind. And so after I had done all this spiritual herbalism apprenticeship, I'd done a plant walk with the rose, and I had really opened myself up spiritually, emotionally, all of these things. Like, my heart space was healing. And what I realized was, continuing in this work, I was not going to be able to take myself with me. Like, I would have to leave myself at the door. And I was tired of doing that. And I know a lot of other people are too. I promise this is not a video about quitting your job. This is about supporting yourself. This is really what it is. And if quitting your job is the way you support yourself, then so be it. But I will never tell somebody to relinquish their resources. I just won't tell them that. I think that's a decision you make on your own, and I'll support you through it. So here's what I'm supporting you with today. Adaptogens. The first one that comes to mind is oat straw. Oat straw is a plant that comes from the same thing as oatmeal. And so it's just a more potent part of the plant. And that's honestly the one I started with. I remember one day sipping it, and, I'm always skeptical. I'm always anxious about new things. And so I sipped it, and I remember I didn't even drink that much, and I just sunk into my chair. And so oat straw is a hug in a cup herb. It supports the nervous system. It helps to rebuild the myelin sheath, which protects our nerves. Let's see what else. It's really good for grief, transition, transforming. It's really good for helping you get from here to there. And it's something you can incorporate multiple times a day, every day. It's safe enough to do that. As long as you don't have a gluten sensitivity, oat straw is pretty safe. I know even pregnant women are able to take it. Now, again, you're always going to consult a physician when you include herbal remedies into your routine, especially if you're taking medicine, because there are contraindications with herbal medicine and pharmaceutical drugs. There are contraindications. Just with herbal medicine, period. If there are certain conditions you have or certain needs you have, that is why, they tell you to work with a physician, because certain herbs will work differently in your body. So the ones I like to suggest are usually the safer ones with low contraindications or no contraindications. Floral remedies are going to be very beautiful for supporting, for emotional support. You're one of those people who get emotional when it's time to get up and go to work, or while you're at work. I remember some days I would just be emotional. I would be anxious and emotional. Floral remedies are your friend. Sip them all day. Most of them are pretty safe to drink. You've got calendula, you've got lavender, chamomile, You could even do peppermint. It's not floral, but you could do peppermint leaf. Um, you've got rose petals, hibiscus. Those are all going to be so supportive to your, for emotional support. So, and then lastly, I want to talk about ashwagandha because I think a lot of people know about it. It was kind of a, a buzzword remedy that a lot of people use, but with ashwagandha, there are contraindications. And so you'll need to dive more into what that looks like. But ashwagandha is kind of like willpower. It's force energy. It is like horse energy. And it's really about getting it done. But while getting it done, you're not burning yourself to the ground. You're supporting your nervous system. A lot of people use ashwagandha to help them sleep. But it also gives you stamina. And so I like to use it for both. I will drink ashwagandha in the morning. I have ashwagandha in my latte. Well, this isn't a latte today, but it's usually a latte. I have ashwagandha in this drink. But there are dosages that you need to be mindful of and preparation that you need to be mindful of. So again, as an herbalist, this is why I'm sharing this, because it's not just go to the store, get an ashwagandha pill and take it. You could do that, but there are things you need to consider. So there's herbal medicine for you. I also want to bring up therapists. I found my soul therapist during the pandemic. I had a therapist before while we were in the office, and she was okay. She allowed me to release. She listened. I rambled about my sister way too much. Me and my sister were roommates at the time, but so she was helpful with that. But I found my soul therapist. Am I a soul herbalist? I found my soul therapist the closer I got to getting back to myself, getting connected to myself. I just realized that as soon as I was ready to kind of follow a path of purpose, or like knew that, okay, I don't want to continue something that doesn't feel purposeful for me, my soul therapist presented themselves. So that's kind of funny how that happened, because I never really looked at it like that, but that's kind of what I worked with her, was connecting more to my soul. And that was not intentional, and it's not even like a language she used in therapy, but I know that that's what that was. And so I want you to encourage you, if you're somebody who needs extra support, therapy is normal. Therapy is maintenance. Therapy is change, transition. Therapy is healing. I think a lot of us associate therapy as like something is wrong with us. But honestly, therapy is because there is something wrong with the way this world wants us to live. And so it's just a normal part of supporting yourself at this point. There are a lot of resources on how to find a therapist. And I don't want you to be scared with, or, disappointed if the first therapist you go to you don't like. I've had like 5 therapists. And my favorite was one. I had one that was okay. And then one that I was like, when your books open back up, send me an email. Something new that I'm getting into is life coaches. I have a life coach now. And that has been super helpful, working with a life coach and a therapist. Because, with the therapist, I'm dealing with processing emotional things, past, present, future, all of those type of things. With the life coach, I am implementing the changes that I see necessary based on what I processed, based on what I realized. How can I implement these changes in every area of my life? And so we are talking about business. We are talking about trying new things. We are talking about expansion. I definitely recommend life coaches. One day I want to have a collection of people that I would refer people to. So the other thing is, that might be a little, nobody wants to talk about it. Pharmaceutical medication. I also went to a psychologist because in order to get prescription medicine for your mental health, most people have to have a is that what that's called? Psychologist? I forgot. But don't be afraid of pharmaceutical medicine. And I'm telling you that as an herbalist, because I think they both have their place, and I think there are ways they can support each other. And so I went on the stint of, I was taking anxiety medication. I started having panic attacks in college, halfway through college. And so it was either leave or get on some medicine. And I wasn't ready to give up, what I was working on. I think that was probably the first calling to let you know, like, hey, this may not be in alignment with you. But in my mind at that time, I had no other options. And I'm sure I had plenty of options. My mom was very supportive, but I wasn't ready to explore other options. I wanted to try it. I wanted to get through it and see if I liked it. And I mean, I did. I mean, I didn't love engineering, but I enjoyed the life that I had. I enjoyed the opportunity. I started doing internships and going to different states and living there for the summer. And I loved that. And so, yeah, I had to start anxiety medication to move through that. So, through the years, I would taper up if I needed it or taper down. And of course, I wanted to get off of it at some point, but there was never a good time. Again, this environment that I'm working in, it was almost like I needed it more. So anytime I would taper down, I would find me a level, I would do all the things, yoga, exercise, all these things to help mitigate some of the stress and balance. And so I was spending so much time trying to balance all of this energy. I drank tea all the time, but I wasn't as into it. I wasn't a herbalist at the time. So I was just, whatever I needed to calm me down, bring me some joy. And so that's what that looked like. And I remember getting in a car accident, and then I had to jump from like 10 milligrams to 20 milligrams. And I was always scared because I'm like, what if something happens in life where there's not another level to jump to with this medicine? Will I be okay? Will I have a mental breakdown? All of these things. So there's so much fear that plagues into that. But I think I want to support you in saying, if that is something that you're doing, if that is something that you're considering, you can make that decision and there is no wrong answer. So all full transparency, I transitioned off of my medicine. I think I started taking 5 milligrams for like a year or so. And then I transitioned off right around the time I quit my job. And so there was some confusion there, and people were like, are we sure it's not the medicine? I'm like, no, like I wanted to do this before. Like people were really psyching me out about but my mom was more of like, maybe it's not a good idea to do both at the same time. Like it's a shock to the system. And I was like, well, I've already started transitioning. I don't want to go back on. And so I did for maybe 3 months. I was off of the medicine while I was in this transition from corporate to starting my entrepreneurial journey. And honestly, when I first left, I was going to find a different job that just wasn't a corporate environment. It wasn't doing the same work that I was doing, just making a shift. And eventually, it was clear to me that I was supposed to make a shift into myself, into my own thing. But I kind of went through a little depression after I transitioned out of my corporate job, because it's almost like my system was in shock. Like, what are we doing? Like, what is this? And so I did start back taking the 5 milligrams and continue doing that. And so one of the things that I worked on with that was, what herbal medicine can I add to this so I don't have to, like, if I'm feeling really anxious or if I've got a lot going on, if it's been continuing for a while, what herbal medicine can I add to that to support that? And so there are different resources for combining the two. But again, I even confirmed it with my doctor, because she's somebody who was, also into, I forgot what the medicine is called, but it's more of incorporating all things for your health, and your care. And so, some doctors are not really in favor of herbal medicine. They don't necessarily believe in it. And then some doctors are like, it has its place. And so for me, that's the type of doctor I wanted to see, is someone who had space for it. And so, that was something I worked on. And so, I want to witness you and let you know that you are not alone in that space, and you're not crazy for what you feel being in that space. And you may not even have anxiety. You may not be depressed. You may just be in a position that is not in alignment with who you are. So until you're ready to make the transition, or if you're never ready to make the transition, you trying to climb to the corporate ladder, the top of the top, and you just need to be taken care of in the process. I want to support you through that. I want to be your morning encouragement, to know that it can get better. I always had to make sure I had something to look forward to every day at work, whether it was a person or an activity, even making my tea. there was something that I needed to hold on to. I had a playlist for going to work, like to get in the right mindset. So I just want to be a friendly face to tell you that I've been there. And one of my goals was to be a resource. Like, I would have loved to be in the corporate environment and help work on the environment. Like, I always would say that, like, man, if they just change this environment, this could really be a nice setup. This could be really beneficial for a, full life experience. And so, yeah, I want to be a friendly face that supports you in that. I would have loved to be in a corporate environment and do that, but that was never the opportunity that presented itself. And so this is the opportunity that presented itself, was you can support people where you are. So yeah, I'd love to hear your feedback on this video, your experiences in corporate, the type of work you do, and what kind of support that specifically you're looking for, and how I can share more resources on that, because I have the time and space to do that. And this is what I love doing. I love being a resource to my community, people I care about, people I understand, people I don't understand and want to understand more. It's all about the soul care for me, because there's always a deeper thing going on for everything that presents itself. There's always a meaning behind it. I love connecting the synchronicities of life, and I've just watched this process unfold for me. And so I probably will break down all of these things that I've talked about today into separate videos, and I'd love for y'all to join me.